Human gets arrogant alien diplomat pregnant for revenge. She's absolutely furious. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. The plasma storm rolled across Vaelira, for like a living electric beast, rattling the diplomatic station until every beam in the glasswork ceiling trembled. Somewhere deep inside the research wing, Elias Ward crouched beside a cracked console, sparks dancing across his gloves as he forced open the encrypted access port. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not after what happened 3 years ago. But the digital dossier Vaelira Sythra forged against him had cost him his badge, his career, and every belief he ever had about justice. Tonight, he intended to take everything back. The lights flickered, sirens warbling as the storm outside slapped the structure with waves of charged dust. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, the dry air biting like needles. He rerouted a power line, watching the screen flare to life just long enough to reveal the corrupted file he'd been chasing for years. And then footsteps echoed. Sharp, metallic, unmistakably hers. Vaelira entered the chamber with that predatory stillness only Lytheran diplomats possessed, her silver skin catching the emergency strobes as if she were carved from molten metal. Her golden eyes locked onto Elias instantly, hard and bright. Human, she said, not even bothering with his name. Is there no depth of irrelevance you won't sink to? Elias straightened slowly, jaw tight, refusing to give her the satisfaction of flinching. Good evening to you too, Ambassador. The chamber rumbled. A glass conduit overhead shattered, releasing a cloud of shimmering vapor that swirled like liquid moonlight. The containment doors slammed shut so fast Elias barely dodged. A red warning blared. Pheromone chamber activated. Biological lockdown in effect. Vaelira whipped toward the console. You idiot. This facility studies cross-species bonding responses. That vapor is not meant for unsupervised exposure. Elias took a step back only for the floor to lurch violently, sending Vaelira stumbling forward. Instinct pushed him to catch her, his hands gripping her arms. Warm, smooth, unnervingly cold beneath the surface. The vapor pulsed. A low hum rose from the walls. Vaelira froze. Her pupils thinned to knife slits. Do you understand what you've just done? She whispered. That contact, during an active pheromone surge, constitutes a pair bond imprint under Lytheran law. Elias blinked. It was an accident. Every war in my empire's history began with an accident, she hissed. And then the lockdown clamps blew open, the shockwave throwing them into a cascading shower of fractured crystal. Elias dragged Vaelira behind an overturned console as debris rained around them. She winced, gripping her leg where a shard had cut deep. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely shaken. He tore open an emergency kit, spraying sealant foam over the wound despite her snarled protests. Save your outrage, he muttered. If this place collapses, that imprint will be the least of your worries. Another tremor hit, followed by the grinding roar of security drones powering up. Vaelira's eyes widened, fury shifting into something sharper, more dangerous. Human, she said, voice low, you may have doomed us both. And somewhere behind the walls, the first drone clawed its way free, searching for targets. Its metal limbs scraped like bone on stone as it scanned the shattered chamber, red optics flickering with escalating hostility. Elias steadied himself, feeling the chamber tilt as the storm intensified, and he realized escape would demand more luck. Vaelira's breath hitched, her voice thinning as the pheromone surge tangled with fear, but she forced herself upright beside him. Human, she murmured. If you want to survive this, follow my lead. Then the drone fixed on them and charged. The drone lunged with a burst of red optics and a shriek of metal servos, the sound cutting through the fractured chamber like a warning from something half machine, half predator. Elias Ward moved first. He grabbed Vaelira Sythra by the wrist, pulling her behind a collapsed support beam just as the drone fired a streak of burning plasma that sliced a glowing line across the floor. The heat brushed his cheek, hot enough to sting. Vaelira hissed in pain as her wounded leg buckled, but she did not argue. Not now. Not when the entire research wing trembled under the raging plasma storm tearing across Varexis. 4. The drone recalibrated, its metal claws skittering as it crawled up a shattered column, tracking them from above. The golden flicker of Vaelira's eyes sharpened. It is hunting us based on pheromone saturation. That surge painted us both as biological anomalies. If it reaches full targeting lock, it will not stop until we are dead. Elias kept his breathing steady. He scanned the room for anything useful. Then we break the lock before it finishes. Vaelira's brows lowered in disbelief. You cannot outmaneuver a Warden-class drone, human. Watch me. Elias grabbed a cracked coolant canister from the debris, thumbed the manual release valve, and hurled it at the drone's face. The canister burst in a white cloud, frosting the optics and throwing the machine into a blind, metallic roar. It crashed to the ground, smashing through equipment with uncontrolled fury. Elias lifted Vaelira's arm over his shoulder, supporting her weight as they crossed the chamber. The floor vibrated beneath them, warning of structural collapse. Sparks rained from overhead conduits like fragments of lightning. Vaelira's breathing hitched, not from pain, but from the pheromone surge still twisting her biology into warped instinct. Human, she said under her breath. That imprint, it is destabilizing my neural clarity. Stay with me, Elias muttered, adjusting his grip. We are getting out of here. They reached a secondary hatch, sealed by a biometric lock. Vaelira slapped her palm on the panel, and the system scanned her DNA signature twice before chirping an error. Storm interference. The lock is corrupted. Suddenly the room behind them erupted. The drone, optics barely functioning, had regained a partial lock and fired blindly. Plasma bolts carved glowing scars in the wall, one of them grazing the air inches from Vaelira's long silver hair. Elias spun her around, slamming his hand onto the manual override panel. Tell me there is an emergency bypass. Vaelira angled her head, listening through the hum of failing systems. Lower left corner. Remove the panel. Bridge the orange and blue conduits. Elias tore the plate off and sparked the two wires together. The door screeched open only halfway, just enough. He shoved Vaelira through and slid in behind her just as the drone fired again, the blast sealing the door with a molten dent. They were plunged into darkness. Emergency cyan lights flickered on a few seconds later, revealing a narrow maintenance corridor filled with vibrating ducts and humming coolant pipes. Elias leaned against the wall, chest rising and falling. Vaelira steadied herself on a pipe, her voice a whisper of strained pride. You saved my life. Twice. Elias wiped grime from his face. Do not get used to it. She stared at him, golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim corridor. For a human, you show an absurd reluctance to die. I could say the same about you, Elias answered. A faint tremor moved through her shoulders, almost a scoff, almost something else. Then the corridor shook violently as another plasma surge rocked the station. Dust drifted from the ceiling. A siren wailed, structural failure imminent. Evacuate. Vaelira looked toward the echoing passage ahead. We cannot go back. The drone will breach the door within minutes. So forward it is, Elias said. They pushed deeper into the maintenance tunnels until they reached a crossroads of pipes and service consoles. Vaelira pressed her hand to a crystalline interface. A holographic map flickered to life, showing a branching network of corridors leading to a circular chamber labeled Biological Filter Core. Elias frowned. That is our way out. Yes, Vaelira said. The nearest safe route runs directly through the Biological Filter Core. He studied her expression. It was tight, conflicted. What is in that room? Vaelira inhaled slowly, her breath shimmering in the cold air. It will react to the pair bond imprint. Elias felt a sinking weight form in his chest. React how? Her eyes met his in the dim blue glow, fierce and furious and trembling all at once. By revealing whether that imprint was accidental or biologically compatible, Elias understood instantly, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the collapsing station around them. The corridor lights flickered in a jittery cyan pulse as Elias Ward and Vaelira Sythra pressed deeper into the maintenance tunnels, the echo of the drone's metallic claws still chasing them like a nightmare refusing to let go. Every distant thud made dust dance from the pipes overhead. Elias kept Vaelira close, her injured leg dragging slightly, her breath weaving between steady discipline and the unstable tremor caused by the lingering pheromone surge. The map projection she carried flickered again, highlighting the route toward the biological filter core. Elias studied the floating lines, their pale glow reflecting in his eyes. "Tell me exactly what this chamber does," he said. Vaelira's jaw tightened, her silver skin catching the faint light in a muted shimmer. The filter core is designed to analyze and neutralize cross-species contaminants. Under normal circumstances, it removes radiation dust, airborne pathogens, and chemical residues. But when a pair bond imprint is detected, the system interprets it as a biological event requiring deeper analysis. Elias frowned as they passed a series of massive coolant coils humming with resonant vibration. "Meaning?" Vaelira's voice dropped, controlled but shaken. "Meaning it will evaluate compatibility. Genetic, neural, endocrine. It will calculate whether two individuals have the potential to produce viable offspring." Elias blinked. "That is extreme." "It is Lytheran science," she replied. "Efficiency over sentiment." A tremor shuddered through the station. Pipes overhead rattled, and a sharp hiss of escaping steam filled the air before the safety valve slammed shut. Vaelira stumbled. Elias caught her automatically, his hands steadying her waist as her fingers dug into his shoulder. The pheromone surge reacted instantly, sending a jolt through both of them, a hot flash of tension that neither invited but could not entirely deny. Vaelira jerked back, breath sharp. "Do not touch me unless you intend to worsen the imprint." Elias raised his hands in surrender. "Then try not to fall." She shot him a venomous look, but behind the fury was something rawer, more uncertain, something he had never seen from her before. They continued until the tunnel opened into a circular antechamber. A set of double doors stood ahead, coated in crystalline panels that pulsed like a sleeping organism. A soft blue mist curled beneath them. Above the door, a warning glowed. "Biological filter core. Active analysis in progress." Elias's pulse quickened. "Someone activated it recently?" Vaelira leaned against the wall, examining the interface. "It is automated. The station detected our imprint the moment the lockdown began. The core has been preparing for our arrival." "Feels like a trap," Elias said. "It is not a trap," Vaelira answered quietly. "It is worse. It is the truth." Their eyes met, and for a moment the plasma storm outside sounded distant, muffled by the pounding in their ears. Vaelira placed her palm on the crystalline seal. Her breath misted in the cold air. "Before we enter," she said, "there is something you must understand." Elias waited. Vaelira's gaze dropped, her golden eyes darkening. "If the system identifies compatibility, the result becomes part of the diplomatic record. Irrefutable, unalterable. Lytheran law binds biological data into political contracts." "Contracts?" "Yes," she whispered. "A pair bond imprint with compatibility is treated as a commitment, a merging of bloodline and allegiance. If the chamber confirms a match, the Empire will consider it an official union. A forced union." Elias's chest tightened. "So this could become political." "It will become political," she corrected. "And catastrophic." Before Elias could respond, a violent metallic crash echoed behind them. The drone had breached the previous seal. Its distortion-filled screech traveled through the tunnels like a howl. Elias grabbed Vaelira's arm. "We do not have time to debate. Inside. Now." Vaelira hesitated only a second before pressing her hand to the seal. The crystalline panels melted apart with a soft chime, releasing a wave of frost-scented air that rolled across their legs. Elias guided her through the widening gap as the chamber lights brightened in a clinical glow, illuminating the curved walls lined with scanning arrays. The door began to close behind them. The drone's red optic appeared in the tunnel just as the last sliver of the opening sealed shut. Silence fell. Vaelira exhaled a trembling breath. Elias turned, taking in the circular room that hummed like the inside of a living heartbeat. "So," he said softly, "what happens now?" Vaelira stepped forward, her expression torn between dread and defiance. "Now," she whispered, "the core decides our fate." The biological filter core came alive with a low mechanical hum, a vibration that traveled through the floor, and up Elias Ward's boots like the heartbeat of some dormant creature preparing to wake. The circular chamber sealed itself behind him, and Vaelira Sythra, the crystalline door dissolving into a seamless wall of pale light. Elias scanned the room quickly. Arrays of scanning rings floated in the air, rotating with precise, silent motion. Holographic filaments dangled like translucent strands, shifting in the cold air currents. The space smelled faintly of metal frost, sharp and clean. Vaelira stood rigid, her silver skin reflecting the clinical glow around them. Even injured, even shaken, she held herself like the diplomat the galaxy feared, composed, calculating, unreadable. Only her eyes betrayed her. The golden irises flickered with something Elias had never seen from her before. Vulnerability. When the system begins, she said softly, do not move unless it instructs you. Elias nodded, steadier than he felt. Tell me what to expect. It will analyze biological imprint signatures. Her voice wavered. It will interpret what happened in the pheromone chamber as intentional, as a bonding act. Elias exhaled slowly, grounding himself. We know it was not intentional. Vaelira's gaze hardened. Lytheran systems do not care about intent, only data. Suddenly the scanning rings snapped into formation, aligning around them in concentric circles. The air tightened with static electricity. A voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once, smooth and toneless. Pair bond imprint detected. Begin compatibility assessment. Vaelira closed her eyes as beams of pale blue light slid across her skin. Elias stood beside her as another set scanned him, warm as a subtle breath. Lines of data folded through the air like floating strips of color. The system spoke again, neural synchronization, evaluating. Elias felt a pulse tap the base of his skull, like a finger made of energy pressing lightly. A moment later, a second pulse radiated from his chest, syncing with the rise and fall of his breath. His heartbeat thudded audibly in his ears. Then he heard Vaelira's. A second rhythm, sharper, faster, almost musical in its precision. The system was linking them. He shot her a glance. Vaelira's expression tightened. Her voice emerged in a careful whisper. This part will pass. You sure? No, she admitted. But pretending helps. More rings rotated around them, lowering until one hovered inches from Vaelira's sternum. That same ring rose again and paused near Elias's heart, comparing rhythms. Endocrine resonance, analyzing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ring pulsed. Elias felt a warmth spread through him, not entirely his own. Vaelira inhaled sharply, her breath trembling. The glow from her skin intensified, silver turning faintly iridescent. Elias stepped forward instinctively. Are you all right? Do not interfere, she whispered. This is a biological reaction. The system is forcing our chemistries to align for assessment. That sounds invasive. It is. That is the point. Suddenly the chamber darkened. Only a single projection illuminated the floor between them, a lattice of intertwined shapes, some human, some Lytheran. Vaelira's eyes locked onto it. Her voice cracked, the slightest fracture. This is it. The viability test. Elias waited, tense, the cold air vibrating against his skin. The system hummed, considering. The shapes pulsed slowly, one set overtaking the other, then merging again. Vaelira gripped her own arms, a defensive reflex. She had feared many things in life, but Elias saw it now. This frightened her in ways she would never admit. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of the truth. The system's final sequence began. Rings converged above the projection, forming a single sphere of concentrated light. The hum deepened, echoing through Elias's bones. Vaelira's shoulders rose with a slow inhale. Whatever result appears, it cannot leave this chamber. Not yet. You have my word, Elias said without hesitation. The sphere brightened. Data strips whipped through the air. Elias's pulse quickened. Vaelira's breath hitched. The room crescendoed into a blinding glow. And then, the system spoke. 2 words. Calm. Irrefutable. Compatibility, confirmed. Vaelira staggered back as if struck, her eyes wide, disbelieving, furious, and something else Elias could not yet name. The chamber fell silent except for the soft echo of her breath breaking unevenly in the cold air. Vaelira Sythra stood frozen in the cold glow of the biological filter core, her golden eyes wide with disbelief as the words compatibility, confirmed, echoed through the chamber like a decree neither of them had asked for. The scanning rings slowly withdrew into the ceiling, leaving behind a silence so sharp Elias Ward could hear the faint clicking of overheated conduits cooling around them. Vaelira's breath wavered, her elegant posture collapsing for half a second, just long enough for Elias to glimpse the weight of what this meant in her world. Then her spine straightened like a blade being reforged. "This system is malfunctioning," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "It must be. There is no reality in which our genetics align." Elias stepped closer but cautiously, aware of how thin her composure had become. "The system does not make political mistakes. You told me that yourself." Her jaw clenched, the line of her throat tightening as she hissed. "It was an analytical evaluation, not a declaration. It does not define us." Before Elias could respond, the chamber lights dimmed, and an alert rippled across the curved walls. "Secondary failsafe activated. Hormonal balance stabilization in progress." Vaelira's gaze snapped upward. "No, not that. It will attempt to normalize the bond imprint to prevent biological stress." "Meaning what?" Elias asked. "Meaning it will further synchronize our hormonal levels temporarily. It is invasive and unnecessary." Elias frowned as warm pressure rolled through the room in a gentle pulse. The air thickened with static, not threatening, but insistent, like a hand pressed subtly against their chests. Vaelira staggered, catching herself against the wall. "This is intolerable," she breathed. "The system is treating us as if we willingly initiated a union." Elias felt his heartbeat sync again with hers, that strange dual rhythm he had sensed earlier returning like an echo. He stepped toward her, not touching her, but close enough that the stabilizing field seemed to pull their breaths into similar cadence. "It will pass," he murmured. "You said that once already." Vaelira glared, but there was no real venom in it. Only exhaustion. Only fear of losing control in a situation where control defined her entire existence. Before she could retort, the floor vibrated violently. A low rumble traveled through the walls as the plasma storm outside intensified. A red warning flared across the ceiling. Structural integrity compromised. Core failure imminent. Vaelira pushed off the wall, steadier despite the pain in her leg. "We need to leave. The drone will not break in here, but the roof might collapse first." Elias nodded and guided her toward the crystalline door, which reformed with a soft chime, unsealing into the maintenance corridor. The second they stepped out, a metallic roar tore through the passage ahead. The Warden drone had forced its way deeper into the system, its red optics pulsing like enraged embers. It scanned the corridor, locking onto them with a shrill frequency spike. Vaelira inhaled sharply. It has adapted to the interference. It will not be blinded again. Elias pulled her behind a coolant pipe as a burst of plasma scorched the wall beside them. The heat seared the air, leaving a molten streak across the metal. Elias checked the path behind them, judging the distance. "If we move now, we can make it to that junction." Vaelira shook her head. "You will not outrun it. It will target the stronger signature." Elias frowned. "Meaning yours?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "The pheromone surge enhanced my bioelectrical profile. I am the primary target." Elias clenched his fist. "Then we changed the target." Before Vaelira could protest, Elias ripped a damaged power module from the wall, sparks flying across his arm. He slammed it into the coolant pipe, forcing a burst of cryo steam that washed over him in a freezing cloud. His heat signature dropped instantly. Vaelira stared at him, eyes widening as she realized what he had done. "Human, that is dangerous. It needs to see me as the threat," Elias replied. "Get ready." The drone screeched and charged. Elias stepped out into the open, drawing its focus entirely onto him, giving Vaelira the opening she needed. And for the first time since the catastrophe began, she whispered something not filled with anger, but with something almost like fragile respect. "Do not die, Elias Ward." The drone lunged, and the corridor exploded in sparks. The corridor detonated in a shower of sparks as the Warden drone slammed into Elias Ward with a speed that felt almost predatory, its metal limbs scraping across the floor like claws dragging over steel. Elias dove sideways at the last possible second, rolling beneath a burst of plasma that scorched the ceiling and rained molten fragments around him. His breath hitched from the freezing coolant clouds still clinging to his clothes, but the chill kept his heat signature low enough to confuse the drone's immediate targeting. It spun violently, recalibrating with glitching whirs. Vaelira Sythra watched from the shadows, the glow of her golden eyes narrowing as she assessed Elias's reckless diversion. Her leg trembled where the earlier injury threatened to buckle, but she forced her posture straight, her fingers tightening around a broken shard of crystalline panel. She whispered under her breath, almost too soft for even herself to hear, "Do not be foolish, human." Elias gritted his teeth and sprinted toward the junction ahead, boots smashing against the metal floor as the drone locked entirely onto him. Plasma bolts cut the air in front of him, burning white trails in the dim corridor. One bolt grazed his shoulder armor, sending a flash of searing heat through his arm. He stumbled but pushed forward, his vision flickering as alarms screamed from every direction. The drone lunged again, metal limbs extending like spears. Elias grabbed a dangling support cable and swung himself toward an exposed maintenance gate, smashing it open with his boot. He dove inside just as the drone crashed into the wall where he had been. Vaelira seized the moment. She stepped from the shadows with the crystalline shard clenched like a dagger, her breath steady, her gaze cold with purpose. The drone wheeled toward her instantly. Its optics flared as it identified the stronger bioelectrical signature radiating from her injured but still powerful form. Elias shouted from the maintenance gate, "Vaelira, get back!" But she did not retreat. Instead, she stepped closer. The drone fired a blast at her chest. She thrust the shard into a coolant valve beside her, rupturing it in an explosive burst of cryo-steam that swallowed her whole. The blast hurled her backward into the wall. Ice crystals formed on her skin, fracturing into glowing dust as they collided with her natural heat. The drone staggered as the intense cold cloud crashed over its sensors, scrambling its targeting again. Elias launched out of the maintenance gate and sprinted toward Vaelira, skidding on the frost-covered metal floor. He caught her before she collapsed completely, her breath shaking with the effort of staying conscious. She looked up at him, silver skin shimmering with frost. "That was not my best idea," she whispered. "No," Elias replied, pulling her up against him as the drone fought to regain visual lock, "but it bought us seconds. And seconds matter." They staggered forward together, each leaning on the other. The pheromone surge clung to the air, warping the space between them with invisible static. Their heartbeats synced again in an involuntary rhythm, pulsing in the narrow corridor as if the station itself held its breath. Vaelira blinked hard, fighting the destabilizing haze clouding her senses. "Elias," she said, voice low but steady, "I need you to understand something before the next confrontation." "Make it quick," he muttered, pulling her behind a broken power coil as another plasma bolt lit up the hall. Vaelira exhaled, her breath cold from the rising frost clinging to her skin. What happened in the biological filter core was not symbolic. It was not hypothetical. It was confirmation of potential. Elias froze, eyes flicking to hers. The drone screeched, closing on them. "Vaelira, do not interrupt." Her voice sharpened. When the system declared compatibility, it also triggered a latent sequence. Apparent compatibility at that level in Lytheran physiology means her voice faltered for the first time since he had known her. It means that if conditions align, conception is not only possible, it is statistically likely. Elias's breath stopped. The sound of the drone charging behind them vibrated through the metal floor like an approaching storm. "You mean, yes," Vaelira whispered, fury and fear trembling through her. Even a single error in proximity could result in biological consequence. Another plasma bolt exploded overhead. Elias grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. "Then let us survive. This before we panic about biology." Vaelira almost smiled. Almost, as they burst into the next chamber. The drone lunged after them, machinery screaming with murderous intent. And somewhere deep inside the collapsing station, the first faint alarm of a new and unexpected biological reading flickered to life. The chamber exploded into a cascade of sparks as Elias Ward and Vaelira Sythra stumbled inside, the reinforced door slamming shut behind them with a metallic clang that echoed through the collapsing station. The room was larger than the narrow corridor they had escaped, lined with towering conduits and humming energy coils that bathed the air in a faint blue glow. The warden drone screeched on the other side of the door, its metal claws carving furious lines into the barrier as it attempted to force entry. Elias leaned against the wall, breath shallow, adrenaline hammering through him as the frost still clinging to his clothes melted into cold rivulets that slid down his spine. Vaelira pressed one hand to her wounded leg, gasping softly as the pain surged through her body in rhythmic pulses. Yet her gaze remained sharp, calculating, refusing to show weakness even now. The chamber lights flickered under the strain of the plasma storm thrashing the station from outside. Elias scanned the room. Where are we? Vaelira steadied her breath. Backup power reserve chamber. If the main conduits fail, this room reroutes energy to keep the diplomatic council alive. It is protected, but only for a short time. Elias frowned. Short time meaning minutes? If we are fortunate. The drone rammed the door again, metal bending inward. Elias's muscles tensed as he considered their options, but Vaelira raised a trembling hand. There is a secondary exit. She nodded toward a sealed hatch on the far side of the chamber. It leads to the upper observatory. From there, we can reach the emergency evacuation corridor. Elias moved toward the hatch, but Vaelira's voice stopped him. Wait. Elias turned back. Vaelira's golden eyes locked onto his, a storm swirling within them. Fury, confusion, biological instinct still warping her clarity, and beneath all that, a trace of something she would never dare voice. You need to understand something before we proceed, she said, each word deliberate. What the biological filter core revealed, what it confirmed, that kind of compatibility is not common. It is not trivial. It is not ignorable. Elias stepped closer, his voice steady. We will deal with that after we survive. Vaelira shook her head, jaw tightening. You do not grasp the consequences. Among Lytheran, compatible pairing is more than an assessment. It carries political weight. Biological potential implies lineage potential, and lineage potential implies obligation. Elias felt a cold pressure settle around his chest, but he stayed calm. You think I care about obligation right now? You should, she replied, voice low and pointed. Because if even a fraction of what we felt during the synchronization persists, the system may have triggered the early stages of bond formation. Elias inhaled sharply. He had felt it, the synced heartbeats, the shared pulses, the strange sensation of her breath mirroring his even when she fought against it. Are you saying, yes, Vaelira whispered. If conditions align, conception becomes not only possible, but highly probable. Silence pressed in around them. Even the roar of the storm seemed to dim for a heartbeat. Then the drone slammed the door again, metal bowing inward with a horrible screech. Elias snapped back into motion. We are leaving. Now. He slid an arm around Vaelira's waist to help her stand. She did not resist this time. She did not even argue. Her fingers curled against his shoulder for balance, the warmth of her touch cutting through the cold air like a spark. For a moment, her forehead hovered close to his, the pheromone haze shimmering between them. Then Vaelira turned away sharply, forcing herself back into the present. Together, they crossed the chamber toward the secondary hatch. Elias pried open the manual release panel. Sparks shot out. The storm had shorted part of the mechanism. It will not hold, Elias muttered. Give me a few seconds. Vaelira closed her eyes, summoning her remaining strength. Her silver skin glowed faintly as she pressed her palm against the biometric seal. The hatch responded instantly to her diplomatic clearance, sliding open just enough to squeeze through. Elias guided her inside first. As he stepped through after her, the warden drone finally tore the main door free. It hurled itself into the chamber with a metallic scream just as the secondary hatch closed. Elias and Vaelira found themselves in a narrow, dark corridor illuminated by distant emergency lights. The floor trembled as the drone's fury echoed behind the sealed barrier. Vaelira steadied herself against the wall, breathing hard. Elias, she murmured, her voice low and conflicted. What? He asked. There is something else the compatibility scan indicated. Something I did not tell you. Elias turned toward her, heart pounding. What did it say? Vaelira lifted her gaze, furious, terrified, and undeniably shaken. It detected the beginning of a biological shift. In me. Elias froze. Meaning what? Vaelira swallowed hard. Meaning, her voice trembled for the first time. Meaning the system believes conception has already begun. The narrow evacuation corridor groaned around Elias Ward and Vaelira Sythra as another shockwave from the plasma storm slammed into the exterior walls, sending a tremor through the metal structure that nearly knocked them off their feet. The emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and recoil with each violent shake. Elias steadied Vaelira before she lost her balance entirely, his hand gripping her arm with controlled urgency. Her silver skin felt unnaturally warm beneath his touch, the faint glow along her collarbones pulsing in a rhythm that did not belong to fear or exertion alone. It was something biological, something internal, something new. Her voice was barely audible when she repeated the words that had stunned him into silence moments earlier. The system believes conception has already begun. Elias swallowed hard, the cold air scraping his throat like broken glass. But how? We have not. I know, Vaelira snapped, though her voice trembled. I am aware of what has and has not occurred between us. But Lytheran biology does not behave like yours. When compatibility reaches a certain threshold, the system sometimes triggers precursor reactions. Instinctive. Cellular. It can misinterpret accelerated bonding chemistry as the onset of gestation. Elias blinked, trying to ground himself in logic as another tremor rattled the corridor. So you are saying you may not actually be pregnant? Vaelira inhaled sharply. I am saying the system believes I could be. That alone is catastrophic. The word catastrophic echoed in the metal passageway, swallowed by the distant sound of the warden drone tearing through the chamber they had just escaped. Vaelira pressed her hand to the wall for balance, her breathing unsteady but controlled. She was a diplomat, trained, calculating, impossibly composed. But even a diplomat had limits. Her eyes flicked toward Elias with a mixture of fury, fear, and something unbearably raw. If the Empire discovers this data, they will see it as political leverage, she said. A powerful bloodline merging with human genetics. They will weaponize it. They will weaponize me. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. I would not let that happen. Vaelira laughed, but it was hollow, brittle. You cannot promise that, Elias Ward. Not against an empire. Not against the council. Not against biology. The corridor shook again, and the emergency lights blinked out for a heartbeat before humming back to life. Elias looked down the passage ahead. We have to move. The escape route is ahead. Vaelira pushed off the wall, steadying herself. Then go. Before the drone breaches the secondary hatch. Elias placed his hand gently against her back, guiding her forward. She did not pull away this time. Not out of surrender, not out of acceptance, but out of necessity, because the storm, the drone, and their own bodies were all turning against them at once. As they moved down the corridor, a high-pitched alarm reverberated from the overhead speakers. Evacuation route compromised. Oxygen levels dropping. Elias cursed under his breath. The storm must have damaged the vents. Vaelira's steps faltered. Her breathing thinned. Lytheran lungs require more oxygen than humans. This is a problem. Elias reacted without thinking. He pulled her close, supporting more of her weight, and quickened their pace. She clung to his shoulder, her body trembling with the strain of low air density. Stay with me, Elias urged. We are almost there. Her voice brushed against his ear, soft and wavering. Elias, if the system was correct, if something has begun, then low oxygen will destabilize the process. It could force my body into emergency metabolic adaptation. That is not safe. Elias tightened his grip, anger flaring through him. Not at her, but at the impossible situation closing in on them. We are not losing you. Not now. Not ever. Vaelira's eyes widened at the intensity of his voice, but she did not argue. The corridor opened into a large observatory deck with shattered windows sealed by flickering force fields, the storm outside painting the room in streaks of violent light. Elias guided her toward the central platform, where an emergency lift hummed with faint energy. Just as they reached it, a deafening clang erupted behind them, the secondary hatch exploding inward as the warden drone hurled itself into the observatory. Its optics burned with murderous calculation, targeting them instantly. Vaelira's breath hitched. Elias stepped in front of her. The drone charged. And at that same moment, Vaelira doubled over, clutching her abdomen as a sharp pulse of silver light rippled beneath her skin. Elias froze. The drone froze. Vaelira choked out a breathless whisper. Elias, something is happening. The light pulsed again, stronger than before. The pulse of silver light rippled beneath Vaelira Sythra's skin again, brighter this time, illuminating the fractured observatory like the flare of a dying star. Elias Ward froze in front of her, his body tense, his eyes locked on the faint glow spreading along her abdomen. For a split second the entire station held its breath. Even the Warden drone hesitated, its red optics flickering as the sudden surge of Lytheran bioenergy scrambled its targeting algorithms. Vaelira collapsed to one knee, gripping the floor as another wave of light radiated through her, each pulse syncing with her heartbeat in irregular, trembling flashes. Elias dropped beside her, his hands hovering inches from her arms, unsure if touching her would make the situation worse. Vaelira, he said, voice low but urgent, tell me what is happening. She tilted her head back, golden eyes burning with pain and something Elias had never seen in her before, pure fear. The system's misinterpretation, the synchronization, it has forced my body into accelerated biological response. My cells are reacting as if conception is confirmed. Elias felt the room tilt. The storm outside roared like a beast slamming against the force fields. But is it real? He asked. Her breath broke. I do not know. The drone screeched, recovering its focus. Its limbs extended, plasma coils glowing hot with lethal intent. Elias moved instinctively, positioning himself between Vaelira and the advancing machine. He could feel her trembling behind him, her breath catching in uneven bursts. Elias reached for a length of broken conduit pipe on the ground, gripping it like a weapon. The drone lunged. Elias threw himself sideways, dragging Vaelira with him just as a plasma bolt detonated where they had been. Shards of molten metal exploded outward. Vaelira cried out, clutching her abdomen as the silver light pulsed again, this time brighter, stronger, almost like a protective flare. The drone staggered back, its sensors overloaded. Elias did not hesitate. He hauled Vaelira toward the emergency lift platform. The floor shook under their feet, cracks forming along the steel supports. Move, Elias urged, wrapping an arm around her waist. She leaned into him, her body weakening under the strain, yet her voice found enough strength to whisper, if we survive, this will follow us. The Council, the Empire, my own bloodline. Let them come, Elias murmured, pulling her into the lift. I am not leaving you. She stared at him, stunned, not by the words, but by how simply he said them, without hesitation, without calculation. The lift doors began to close. The drone shrieked and shot a final plasma bolt that slammed into the lift control panel, sending a surge of sparks through the system. The lift jammed halfway up, suspended between the observatory and the evacuation bay. Elias cursed and pried the doors open with raw force. Metal groaned. Vaelira gripped the side railing, her breath shallow, her skin glowing with unstable pulses. Elias, come on, he said, pulling her upward. Do not stop now. They climbed into the upper evacuation bay just as the observatory floor gave out beneath the lift, collapsing into a storm-lit abyss. The drone plummeted with it, screeching until its voice vanished in the roar of the winds below. Elias and Vaelira collapsed on the floor of the bay, both shaking, both breathing hard. For the first time since the nightmare began, silence wrapped around them. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of survival. Vaelira leaned against the cold wall, closing her eyes as one final, faint pulse of silver light faded across her skin. The reaction is stabilizing, she whispered. My body is rejecting the forced acceleration. Elias exhaled hard, relief flooding him. So you are not. Vaelira shook her head slowly. It was a false precursor. A biological echo. She paused, looking at him with a strange softness. But compatibility remains. Elias reached out and brushed a strand of her silver hair from her face. She did not pull away. Outside the force field dome, the plasma storm began to break apart, fragments of glowing dust drifting through the sky like falling stars. Vaelira studied the light for a long moment before whispering, Human. Elias, Everything that happened tonight will become a diplomatic catastrophe if revealed. Then we will not reveal it, he said simply. Not until you choose to. She blinked slowly, as if the idea of choice was foreign to her. You would lie for me. I would protect you, he replied. Vaelira held his gaze, her expression unreadable, her golden eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of the dying storm. And for the first time, her voice softened into something almost human. Then perhaps, there is a future neither of our species could predict. Elias did not answer with words. He simply stayed beside her in the quiet, as the storm faded and the stars emerged above them, clear, distant, and impossibly gentle, like a promise neither of them yet knew how to name.